Yeah, let's talk about judgment a little bit. I've always wanted to talk about judgment and being judgmental and avoidant of others, especially in real life, right? Obviously, on the internet, things are a little bit simpler. You can sort of go in there and, put people on block, ignore, whatever it's called. You could even report them. Um, but I've made it a hobby of mine, so to speak, to perhaps not meet the right people, but to avoid the right people. And sometimes you look at it from a philosophical sense and from like a moral standpoint, and you always get the question of, well, if you were bound to meet them, wasn't it fated to meet the people you didn't meet, right? So this question I get a lot. So when does the formulaic and when does the your proactivity sort of like go against that which is ordained, right? Something along those lines. And I find it really funny. Um, and I'm just going to share with you guys my results from, let's say, using physiognomy and using discernment and, different types of techniques. Let's say I've learned over the years when it comes to, well, people, um, who to avoid, how to avoid, is better to be left on scene, so to speak, right? And why it's important to me. And I'll tell you exactly why it's important to me. So, one of the few choices you actually get to make as a human being in this life is who you associate with. Some other things, let's say, some events or the unfolding of certain destinies and fates. You can argue that those things can be rather predetermined, and there are some people, obviously, that are predetermined in your life. And these are, let's say, the family you're born into, or like the relatives you have, or people who are you're near to, so to speak, right? Like, firstly materially and physically, and then in some sort of spiritual sense as well. Let's say you meet someone and you feel an intuitive pull or some kind of deep connection with them. Obviously it's very, very difficult and highly unlikely that you will, you still have the choice to sort of disconnect yourself from people like this, but it usually doesn't happen, and it's very difficult, right? There are sort of like ethical points to go through when it comes to that. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? But outside of that, let's say outside of that predetermined circle, you're very much very free. I feel like as a human being, it's one of those freedoms that people take for granted. You're very much very free to choose who you associate with, who you talk to, who you spend your afternoon with, anything, who you go on dates with. Um, how other people have the luxury of either choosing you or not choosing you, right? It's almost like the least predetermined factor in your life, right? You can control everything else. You just can't control the behaviors and actions and choices of other people, right? Um, Now you can physically assert dominance, of course, but that isn't, it's not something that sticks, especially in the modern world. What I mean by that is, if you did want to achieve some sort of sympathy from another person, um, you better be worthy of that sympathy because, well, if they don't like you, they don't like you. There's nothing you can really do about it. It's one of those things in life where, you realize that you are truly equal. You're in this arena of true equality with your fellow humans, right? There's not a single thing you can do to somehow control them or force them to like you in a non-manipulative manner, right? Or a non-violent manner. It's basically impossible. So what I'm trying to say with this is that one of the greatest freedoms that you're allowed and I'm allowed is, well, your ability to choose, right? And other people, which might have been a point of heartache and pain for many, right? Other people also get the ability to choose you or not choose you, right? Now, why am I doing this sort of like introductory disclaimer type of deal? Is because you are in your full rights to avoid who you feel like you should avoid. And I think a very underestimated part of, well, living well, or what I would call the art of quiet living, is knowing who to avoid and what kind of signs to look for. And when I say avoid, I don't mean run away when you see them. I mean strategically and tactically manage who you allow in your vicinity, who you interact with, so on and so forth. There are always signs for this, because of course the universe wouldn't be all wise as it is without handing us the signs for these things to read, right? So, should you be judgmental? Should you cast judgment on people you see and there's something even like about their physicality or their whatever you don't like? Well, no, I don't think you should be. I think you should be very cautious and very careful with making assumptions, especially if your assumptions are wrong. But if your assumptions are educated assumptions, then absolutely you should be judgmental. So it's sort of like that. It's a weird. It makes a weird arc, right? So like the more competent you become, and the more experienced you become with reading people, not just their physiognomy, of course, but their mannerisms, their expressions, their archetype, their phenotype, everything, right? The better you can become at discerning whether, okay, is this an avoid or a not avoid, right? It's almost like swapping right and left in real life, like you would on a dating app or something like that. So when do you become competent in um well assessment of the other, right? You become competent when your intuitive feeling about someone is usually justified by their horrendous actions, right? That's when you become really competent. Now, when you link a certain behavior to a certain temperament and you link a certain temperament to a certain physical feature, this becomes really difficult to unsee, right? One of the things about judgment in general, and let's say physiognomy in general, is that it becomes difficult to unsee. Of course, you can shut it off. So it's like, you know, I always make the example of the musician, listening to a song as, someone who's just experiencing the music, or as a musician where they have that level of awareness and consciousness when they look at a song and they can sort of like break it down into, oh, they used this um, you know chord progression here, and then they use this chord progression, and these are the effects that they put on the music during production, like in a similar sense, right? Like we could turn it on and off, but whenever it's on, it's very difficult to sort of like go past that, right? Obviously there are some exceptions, but I think even like I just say this because I don't know 110%, because I can't study every single human being on earth, and it's just something that we say, right? Oh, it's not 100%, it's not 100 out of 100, when in your subjective experience it very well could be 100 out of 100, but we still have to say that, right? We still have to keep it open ended, in a sense, to not become too rigid, right? And just keep an open mind, so to speak. But most of the times, like, I'll give you an example, okay? If I see a man, actually a man and a woman both, right? And their thumb, right? You look at their thumb, and their thumb is like almost like smashed in. So it's very wide and it's very short, right? I will always avoid anything serious with that person. So I won't avoid like communication or something like along those lines with those people. But I will always avoid, always, always, always avoid anything serious with that person. And is this judgmental? Yes. But has it proven right? Like, has it been proven, like a smart thing to do? Absolutely. Well, you say, well, what can you read from a thumb? right? Well, I'll tell you, well, I can read a lot from a thumb. I can read a lot from a person's fingers, right? And so can you. So, for example, I'll always avoid women who have um, elongated candle-shaped, uh, sort of like discolored candle-shaped nails, right? And when I say candle-shaped, I mean like how fire sits on a candle. It's like almost like perfectly round and elongated on the top, but it has that perfect roundness. Like let's say if a woman has those types of nails on their hand, and then I don't want to say discolored, but let's say they're the same color as the skin, right? I will always avoid women like this because to me that's a very clear cut sign of someone who's an extreme materialist, right? Someone who has materialist expectations of men and their partners. I know already what how they're going to be just by looking at their fingers, right? And well, you can ask me, well, what is the link of that form, that physical sort of like expression to materialism? And I could go into a deep dive, right, an hour's worth, let's say, into how I feel it connects to the larger psyche, in a sense of like, well, who that person is. But we don't want to do that. This is why it's called being judgmental, right? But I can give sort of like a base foundational sort of like information on like, well, why, like if you ask me, well, what kind of people do you avoid, those are the kind of people I avoid. And it's funny when you say like the type of person, like according to like just one thing you saw on their arms, but to me that's very telling. And I'll tell you what it's telling of. It's telling of their archetype, right? So archetype in a wide range of senses and ideas, right? Um, People who have strong archetypes like that, they're really difficult to. They find it really difficult to sort of like go beyond their nature. And this is good. This is really good because you are now in sort of like in an informed state about who they are. So why do I avoid men with like stubby thumbs? Where well, they're usually far less intellectual and far more primal, right? With their sexuality, they usually have some sort of sexual perversion or sexual ideas, or have some sort of um, sort of like uh, yeah, like some sort of perversion that they can't keep under control. This is very common. Like it's so comically common that like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Who else do I avoid? Right? Who else do I avoid? That's a good question as well. Um, I would usually avoid um, in terms of let's say a long-term partner or like a serious relationship or something like that with women who have um, a gummy smile, especially on the top side, right? Women who have like a gummy smile, like their teeth are like lower, they show a lot of gum. I avoid that. That's a very clear sign of someone who is very unintellectual. Um, Someone who can be strangely disloyal at times, right? So I always avoid that too. Like it's a strange mix of like mm, if you want a partner or a wife who's um not that intellectually gifted and can conform to sort of like whatever you command of them or whatever, then yeah, you can go for it, but usually I avoid that. I avoid women with very wide eyes and um very squarish, like wide faces, right? um I avoid women like that too. Because they're too demanding, they're too materialist, right? Um, and yeah, call me judgmental. I don't care. It's proven like right almost all the times for me. And then there's like a bunch of these things, right? That you can like make a little list out of. and I'll always avoid it, right? I don't want to interact with these people, not because they're sort of like bad people or whatever, but because I already know and can predict their issues and their potential behaviors, which I don't want to engage with, right? Um, when you become good at physiognomy in specific, you can outline the shape and the canvas of someone's face. This means that you have access to their sort of like their temperamental foundation, right? Who they are, how they communicate. Like if you know how to read lips, right? You know sort of like um, how they're going to try to relate to you. You know, so whenever I go out and I want to have a good time, I'm always going to speak with people who have, um, like a rounded, elongated shape on their face, because they're going to be academic. So chances are they're going to be rather tasteful, and they're going to be flowy and flexible, and they're going to be artsy in a good sense. They're going to be creative. They're going to be harmonious. They're going to be innovative, right? They're going to be intuitive as well. So I always want to talk to those people who are going to be warm and kind in communication, right? Who do I not talk with? Yeah, I probably won't talk with someone who's all square, right? I won't talk with someone who's all triangular, because they're going to be more assertive. They're going to be more problematic. They're going to be more, and I don't have an issue with this, by the way. I can be assertive and problematic, but what I'm saying is, like, you don't want to clash with other people, right? So, of course, I'm not going to talk with them. I'm not going to. But if I need something done, for example, right? If I go to a place and I need a favor, and the favor is something that you know goes beyond the rule set and the boundary of that, of wherever I am, right? I will always talk to people who have more triangular features, because I know they're more likely to go beyond the system. I know they're more likely to go beyond the rules and laws of that place, even if that place is something as stupid as a bar, right? Like, hey, I want a drink, and they stop selling drinks after 11 a.m., but I want a drink, and it's 11, 05, right? You talk to someone who has sort of like a squarish disposition, and they're gonna double down. They're gonna follow up on the rules, and they're gonna be no drinks after 11, right? Because that's how they are. They're sort of like bound to the system that they serve, so to speak, right? Their whole temperament, they're predisposed to being this way, right? And you hate them for it sometimes, right? You go and speak to someone who's how to say, they have a rounded face that is not elongated, right? During this sort of situation, and they're going to be very apologetic, but they're still going to reject you, right? They're going to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but the rules say the manager is going to be really mean to me if I, break the rules and da da da." So they're going to be very apologetic and conflict averse usually, but they're also not going to give you the shit you want, right? So obviously, like, I'd avoid going to either of these people, right? But then you go to someone who's a little bit has a little bit more of that trickster in them, so to speak, right? And they'll slide you a beer, right? And they'll be like, oh, they'll look at the clock and they'll be like, oh wow, this clock is like five minutes off or something, man. Like, y- you want to go and interact with people who will behave in beneficial ways to you according to the situation. People don't realize what a great skill this is to have. And it is absolutely ethical. There's nothing unethical about it. It's like if I told you, hey, my neighbor Bill is an asshole, my neighbor John is a nice guy, would you rather hang out with this guy or that guy? Well, of course I don't want to hang out with the asshole, right? That is within my rights as a human being to be able to choose who I could get to hang out with. But people love to make a big deal out of it and say, well, you're being, judgmental. No, I'm just being avoidant of a crappy situation, right? It's important to ground yourself in reality, when it comes to who you interact and interface with, right? Not everything is this abstract philosophy, especially in real life, in reality, where you go and you live in this, happy, tolerant world or whatever, and then reality hits you in the face, right? And the reality is, some people can be very problematic. Some people are going to waste your time. Some people are going to be low quality to hang out with. You ever hang out with someone and immediately regretted it? When you knew you shouldn't have hung out with them, and you hang out with them and they just drain your energy and it just doesn't feel good, right? I have many times, because you tend to give too many chances, right? You tend to be convinced by society at large that you're committing some sort of thought crime, right? When you sort of like uh, give like attach tax to people and be like, well, I would love to hang out with this person because they're very knowledgeable. I don't want to hang out with my other neighbor who like all they do is complain about things. I don't want to listen to someone complaining, right? Do you want to listen to someone complaining? I don't. Would you rather listen to a spaces where from which you can derive like interesting information about archetypal physiognomy from, or would you listen to a spaces where someone complains about the price of vegetables increasing, in their state where they're from, like that type of thing? So no, it's not judgmental. You're just picking and choosing, right? Um, Now, again, we've mentioned this in the past. What other people I avoid, like specifically owners, male owners who look like their dogs. Always avoid. Don't even question why. Just avoid. Just get rid of them, like immediately, right? This is such like a deliberate thing from them too. They know how comical it looks, right? And yeah, these people have sort of like a darkness to them that you always want to avoid, right? Always. um Women who hang around horses all the time, I avoid immediately, because they're sexually perverse and secretly they hate men, and they have incredibly obsessive personalities. Avoid at all times. I'm not saying if your girl has a picture with a horse she's like that. I'm saying if all she does is hang around horses, avoid. um, Women who sleep with their pets, and women who sleep with their dogs, especially women, men as well, but women especially. Okay, and I'll tell you a thing, and we're gonna talk about like a nasty thing right now, but I feel like I have to say it because the amount of people who can't connect the dots is just incredible, right? You all know that one girl who has a big dog in her house, and the dog is her life, and her whole friggin', Facebook gallery is filled with pictures of the dog. It's like a family member, right? You're like, oh, what a nice girl. She really likes, animals, and that's blah, blah. You're an idiot, right? So I'll tell you a funny thing, okay? Sometimes it so happens that people get bored, especially women. And women have what is called an ovulation phase. It's when their animalistic sexual side tends to take over a lot, right? And women do very stupid things sometimes during ovulation phase if they're bored. So boredom plus this condition is a very volatile. Are you sensing where I'm going with this, you guys? Are you are you really following where I'm going with this? Do you want to know how common this is? You have no idea how common this is. And just because people can do this in the comforts of their home, right, whatever I'm implying that they're doing, which is not what you think they're doing, by the way, and we're going to talk about it. Yeah. Try to guess what's in their nature, right? So again, women get very bored during this phase, and then they have a pet, which is, let's say, a large hound or a large dog, that they sleep with, absolutely disgusting, in the same bed. And do you know what happens when the dog is in the bed? What the dog has is the dog exerts a lot of warmth and a lot of heat, right? Because, well, it's an animal, far more than the average human does. So sometimes, when the dog brushes up to them, right? Guess what activates, right? Yeah, and then they'll just, do it. Not with the dog. Don't be disgusting. But with the animal present is what I'm saying. Okay? And they feel like, well, it's boredom and so on, and this is okay. Absolutely, like, there's a hygiene issue, right? And then there's something deeper, which is a sexual issue and a psychological issue that will come out 110% when dealing with the opposite gender, right? These are your people who love to say, and this is how they sort of like burn themselves. This is people who love to say, "Oh, I love dogs more than I love humans." Because dogs are so nice and they're always loyal and they're haha, like it's supposed to be a joke, but there are some people who actually mean this. Make no mistake. Always avoid. I always avoid. You have a big dog in your house that you sleep with, and you feed them like with the palms of your hand. Goodbye. Dog walks into your room and gets on the bed, and you sleep with the dog in your bed. That dog's been outside in the mud, licking God knows what. You know what I'm saying? So there are these things that we've accepted as human beings as like, oh, it's totally fine. It's oh, I guess, well, that's just how they are. When these things are very out there in the open and they're very disgusting, right? They're disgusting in a sense where they're unhygienic, and people who are naturally unhygienic like that, people who don't think about these things, they're unaware. It shows their unawareness of things that are dirty and nasty that they do. So I always avoid those. Always, always. I will always avoid women with puffed up lips. Always, always. I don't care. You can be a great person to talk to. You can be a good friend. You can be interesting, but for anything serious, right? Always avoid, right? Because there are two types of puffed up lips. One is the natural, and one is the unnatural one. You've seen both, right? I would say avoid both because that shows an incredibly well, it depends on the type of lips, just so you know, but still, like as a base sort of like fundament, it means a highly um, picky and a highly sensual and sexual nature. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Okay, these are women who love to attract men for all the wrong reasons. They love the attention they get from this. When you engage in intercourse or any kind of sort of like sexual relation with a person, blood tends to swell up, um, in the upper parts of the body, right? As sort of like the pressure increases, so to speak, body temperature tends to increase, and the lips puff up. So, puffed up lips are a first sign of someone who's highly sexually engaged, right? And you don't want a woman who's who's constantly like, how do I say, um, yeah, just giving out that information to her surroundings, to the men in her surroundings, like, hey guys, I'm super sexually available. Come and project your sexual fantasies onto me, because that's what men will do. Most men, like the most dumb and unaware men and so on and so forth. So those types of women love using their sexuality or potential sexuality, right, to commandeer and sort of like begin to manipulate, you know, lesser, like more unaware men to do their bidding, so to speak, to go and you know, use them in self-serving ways. You don't want to be in that rat race. You know what I mean? So always avoid. Um, Women with very incredibly thin lips, especially the upper lip, wide mouth, thin lips, I always avoid. Always avoid. Because these are women who are emotionally completely detached from their feminine. These are women who are detached from their sensual parts, from their empathetic parts. Um, these are women who will talk to you on a pragmatic, logical basis, right? I always avoid. Um, Women with what we call sleepy eyes, right? I personally always avoid. Um, I never want to. Again, they could be fun in communication, so on and so forth. Nothing serious ever. And I'm not talking about. So let's roll back on it a little bit here. I'm not talking about when a woman has like soft resting eyelids, when she can be charming, right? When she can be sort of like she has that like mystique or mysteriousness about her. I'm talking about like uh, someone who has not even like a resting bitch face or what you would call a resting bitch face, but someone, yeah, like someone who has this non-alertness on their face, someone who has this sort of disposition or look where they're unimpressed by life and whatever you give them, right? Sleepy eyes that never, you know, like fully open up, that never really fully like they're not intense and they're not open. So they're not in awe and they're not focused. They're somewhere in between at all times. You always want to avoid people like this, especially women, right? Because women's eyes are so active. Women blink so much more than men do. Go Google the difference between how many times women blink and how active a woman's eyes are compared to a man's eyes. You'll be amazed at what you find. But the lesson here is women's eyes are meant to be hyperactive and they're meant to be far more telling than male eyes. Male eyes at their resting state are far more telling about a man, and female eyes in their active state, as they're expressing constantly, are far more telling than a man's active eyes. So when a woman's eyes are inactive, do not engage, my dear friends. Avoid, right? Avoid. Um, what kind of men to avoid? The women are gonna love this one. What kind of men to avoid? Um, which is funny because women tend to like going for men like this, but they always regret it. Men with small fucked up ears. Never, ever, ever. This goes for both men and women. Avoid immediately, right? Um, Small ears, 90% of the times, if you don't know physiognomy and face reading, like how to determine, like it's like they're like a poisonous mushroom, you know, like some mushrooms that look like poisonous mushrooms are actually edible, but I'm not going to take the risk, right? Really small ears that are with attached earlobes, absolutely avoid, both for men and women, right? These men will have a very, very low quality of empathy. Immediately avoid. Men with crossed eyes. I tend to avoid these a lot. They usually have some sort of incestuous past. So I will always also avoid those. Um, they'll have some sort of issue, some sort of underlying issue that they're not telling you about. Their family is going to be all kinds of weird. Another type of man that I like to avoid is men who lose their hair in a specific way, like men who will lose men who will start losing their hair at like not from the front going backwards, but from literally like the center point of their skull, like the upper center point of their skull. Like men who start losing their hair from that, because that shows um a, a perverseness, a sort of like a perverse type of sexual incompatibility and sexual. They're just very sexually frustrated. And trust me, if you've ever had a male friend who is very sexually frustrated, they will screw you over just to get it on with, whoever they hope to get it. They will screw you over. Never be friends with a sexually frustrated man. If they can be that way for a little bit, and then you help them and they improve and they you know better themselves, great. But if they remain sexually frustrated, my advice, my suggestion is never have a friend like that. They are going to screw you over when the time comes. They're going to hurt your feelings, and you're going to be disappointed in them, right? And it doesn't matter because they're not going to be apologetic about it. Because men like that, men who are very sexually frustrated for a very long time, they tend to get really selfish. They tend to become really selfish secretly. And the whole world becomes all about them. It's all about how the world owes them something, and it has to serve them at all times, including you. By the way, you have to hear about all their problems and all their issues all the time. You have to be there for them all the time. You're never doing enough for them to play out their degenerate sexual fantasies without ever improving themselves. So avoid men with sweaty hands. My opinion, my suggestion, always avoid. You shake a man's hand and it's sweaty, goodbye. Again, same thing, that talks about a perverse sexual nature. Okay, it's not my fault they have sweaty hands. Okay, it's not their fault they have sweaty hands, but it's their fault that they are by nature carrying this trait. And I guarantee you, if they fixed their psychosomatic link, so the psychosomatic link is something that, it connects from a psychological point to a physical thing on the body. In this case, let's say, you know, sweaty palms of your hands, right? If they fixed that psychosomatic link, that wouldn't be so. If you're a man, or woman, but mostly men have this with sweaty hands, please make sure dry them often, right? And really start to think about your sexuality and your unexpressed sexuality and your unexpressed desires and your unexpressed emotions and ideas and your inability to accept your own sexuality. Because, at some point, it damages you, and it also damages other people, right? If I shake hands with a man and their hands are sweaty, I already know who I'm dealing with immediately, right? Never gonna, they're never gonna be my friend, right? They're never gonna get close to me at that level because I'm not going to choose that, right? um Among other things, right? There's so many there's so many other things, like, for example, okay, when a parent and a child, like, we know that, like, obviously the children are going to look like their parents. They're going to have some traits that are similar. But when a child and parent look incredibly alike, Like it's like the same human being minus 20 years or something like that. I personally always avoid, because this shows me a degenerated genome. It shows me that the difference in the awareness and the spiritual progress and the intellectual progress between the parent and the child is basically non-existent. It's like super minimal. So I'll always avoid that. Um it's okay if like siblings look like one another, okay? It's okay if like twins look one another all the time. But if the parents, right, especially one parent, right? Like if one parent um looks like exactly like their child, there's some sort of like mental issue there or intellectual issue there when we're talking about early on development and the quality of the genome. And it's the same if both how to say let's say wife and husband, and they look like each other. I always avoid that too. They look way too much like the same person, because you're not genetically linked. How is it possible? Well, it's possible in a sense of like it's not incestuous in a technical sense, but it's incestuous in an energetic sense, so to speak. It's like, when the same person finds themselves and like the other person is like, "Oh, you're just another me, honey." Right? "Oh, you're just another me. Look how compatible we are." They're actually, it's not, I feel like it's less about compatibility with those people. It's just more about both of them have the same issue. Both of them have the same problem. Uh, Both of them have the same shortcomings that they don't want to face. And they found a comfortable person that they can be with, who, shares the lifestyle, so to speak. When you see a couple, you want to see some sort of distinction, right? You want to see that, wow, that's an interesting couple. Like this person has those traits and that person has those traits. It means they somehow either complement each other, but they also challenge one another, and they probably challenge one another in meaningful ways. And the fact that they're together and they have a nice relationship, right? It means that these are people who work on themselves, right? Like it's a part of their sort of like daily routine and part of their nature to work on, you know, whatever they need to work on. So I will always go for people like that. Um, will I choose someone with very large, wide set eyes to go and talk to me about this very specific niche research about something I'm interested in? Of course not. Of course not, because they're not never going to be as detail orientated as you want to think they are. Of course not. Of course not. For that type of thing, I want someone who has a narrower frame of the face, right? Remember, the face of the academic um, elongated in the middle seat. It's an elongated face shape, right? And usually, like people who have an elongated face shape, their eyes are like not too far apart as well. They're more they're more together. So this means that they can focus on a singular thing and a singular task and a singular thought with high levels of detail. This is the type of people you want to talk to about things that require meticulousness and scrupulous detail. These are the types of people you want to talk to when you require a specialist or a mastery in something. When you want to talk about someone who has a lot of, let's say, knowledge and generalist info and a lot of factual info about many different things, then you can talk to someone who has wider set eyes, right? Wide set eyes, and they don't have that academic disposition to them, right? Because chances are they'll know more things, they'll be more informed, right? About specific things outside of their area or discipline of choice, right? um there are many other things that like um people, both men and women, with unnaturally yellow teeth, okay? And like I want to put an asterisk on this. Teeth naturally are never as white as you get it today, right? Like people like just whiten their teeth all the time and blah blah. Sometimes to the point where it's unnatural, right? Some people overdo it. Most people overdo it. So if you have decent hygiene, so on and so forth, your teeth are going to be somewhere between, like sort of like this milky white color and with a slight tinge of yellow, depending on your race, right? So let's say, Slavic people have more transparency in the teeth, for example, and their teeth tend to look white and yellow, like both at the same time. But that's an attractive yellow, so to speak. Um, some people have like, pearly white teeth, like naturally, which is great. Um, some people will have pearly white teeth with certain teeth being, screwed up, you know, yellow. I always avoid that. And I also always avoid people who have, how to say, um, very sharp teeth, very teeth that are intertwined with one another, like very narrow and intertwined, um, that are unnaturally yellow. Because these are people who smoke and drink at the same time, right? When you do that, when you smoke and drink at the same time, right? Especially so if you don't, if you have like a narrow, um, mouth, like the mouth apparatus, if you have a narrow one, like especially if you have like sinusitis and stuff like that, which is fine. Like a lot of people, I've had sinusitis before, but that's not the point. That's beyond the point, right? It's someone who tends to drink and smoke at the same time that have this issue. They have screwed up gums, and their teeth yellow unnaturally, so all over. So I'm not saying that you have like a little bit of plaque or a little bit of yellow like at the roots of the teeth. This is like natural, it's normal. Like it literally happens to everyone. But if all around the discoloration on the teeth is that the teeth are super yellow all around all the time, I immediately avoid. You know why? I know 110% that this person has a hygiene issue. Their breath stinks. I know for sure this person doesn't take care of themselves and their hygiene. I know for sure that these people have a self acceptance issue. They have a self love issue. I always avoid them. You don't want to deal with people, especially men, who have self love and self care issues and hygiene issues because they will screw you over. They will screw you over because they don't even take care of themselves. What makes you think they'll look out for you and take care of you? So I also definitely avoid people like that. Um, Women with chipped um, fingernails. Always avoid. I always avoid them. Always avoid them because um, the fingers and the fingernails for a woman, they're an extension of their inner self. How they, and for men as well, but women even more. The first thing you want to look at a person to determine what their relationship is with themselves, you want to look at their fingers and their nails. Are they healthy and circular? Um, Sometimes when someone has too much of those white lines, right, on their nails, on the fingers, that's not a good sign. People think that's a sign of like health. People think that's a sign of like having enough calcium, right? But most of the times it's not a good sign. Um, you want there to be like a little bit of that, just a tiny bit on, especially on the thumbs, right? You want that to be on the thumbs. But on the rest, you want a nail to have either a little bit of that if they have like larger hands and denser bones in the arms. They're still going to have that. That doesn't mean it's a bad sign. But you want to have, like, the nail has to be like a light pinkish color, right? You don't want it to be all white. and you want it to be perfectly rounded and circular. Like when you look at a person's nails, right? If they're lacking nutrients and vitamins and minerals, so on and so forth, what's going to happen to the nail is it's going to become flat, and it's going to break apart almost. It's going to have those little lines, like uh, like little chipped lines, and instead of the nail being circular, so having like a circular belly, right? They have like a tummy, right? That sort of like comes up from the middle. It's actually going to be inverted. So the nail is going to be like it's going to be smushed in. It's going to be flat. It's going to have those little lines on it, and it's going to be broken up. You want to avoid people like that. Um, they have different psychosomatic deficiencies. They don't take care of themselves very well. When I say don't take care of themselves, I'm talking in a very broad sense. You understand? I don't mean like they don't wash their hands. That's not what I mean. I mean like they don't have time and energy for the world, and they don't have time and energy for you. Right? So the nails are the first thing you want to look at. Like, are they well taken care of? Like, are they clean? Are they circular? Are they rounded? Right? The nails are uh, um, one of the most feminine parts of the human body. And it's very important for both men and women when you study them, because it shows you the sensibilities of that person, the conscientiousness of that person, and the nature of that person, right? Um, wide, short, stubby, wide nails, you always want to avoid that. You always want to avoid that. Then like nails that are, how to say, too narrow and elongated, you want to avoid that, especially in women, but in men as well. You want to avoid that. That is not someone who has the capacity to be loyal to you. Um, they're going to be very self-serving. Again, long nails in women, if they're balanced and symmetrical, is totally fine. That speaks of a certain regality of their genome. They can be highly intellectual, they can be sophisticated, they can be very intuitive. Women who have those types of traits, they can be very intuitive. Men who have that trait, men who have that trait, uh, eh, especially if they have elongated fingers and then very narrow and naturally long nails, never trust men like that. Never, ever, ever trust men like that. They will always lie to you. They will screw you over. Um, they're going to think they're far smarter than you. They're going to use feminine tactics against you, right? And they're never going to, almost never, they're going to be going to find themselves directly responsible for their actions. They're incapable of doing it because they have an overwhelmingly feminine view of the world. And it's very scary because they see the world and you as a hostile force. Okay, never trust men like that. So there's when you have nails on a man that are symmetrical, like you want the nail to be symmetrical. You don't want them to be. You want them to be just as tall and wide, right? Like almost perfect symmetry, right? Um, those are the hands of an honest man, and I don't care. Like they can have like a small hand or a large hand, but if the nails are just symmetrical, right, and they're not too stubby, that's great. That's a balanced person. That's a balanced personality. That's not someone who overexerts or overcompensates in a certain area. So you always want to have good relations with men like that, with men who share that. Now, with women who share that trait, they can be a little bit of a tomboy, so to speak. They can be a little bit more masculine, but they can still be good friends, right? Maybe they won't, be the feminine woman of your dreams, but they will still be loyal, and they will still sort of display those redeeming traits. again, remember this, right? So women who have elongated and long nails, um, great. They're sophisticated. They're highly intellectual. They have like long fingers, right? Great. You want a woman like that, but but only if there's a certain level of symmetry, right? So like, you don't want someone who has very narrow nails but long, especially men. Ooh, like a like a grape shaped um nail on a man, you absolutely want to avoid. Um, and I know this is mean in a way, okay? Like I'm not denying it. It's mean. Like, well, what can they do? I'm just saying, okay? Like, um, that's the natural imprint they're born with. Um, so I know, like, not all poisonous mushrooms that look like poisonous mushrooms are poisonous, but I am not going to take my chances. Not because I'm afraid, because I understand math and statistics. Okay. Um, you can still work with them, but there will always be this sort of like underlying thing, or like, hey, are you trying to screw me over? Are you trying to like one up me somehow? Men like this tend to get really competitive about stupid things. Like the first signs of a weak man is like if gets competitive about the little things, right? Like meaningless, stupid things among friends, right? You never want to have a friend that's competitive about everything, right? Like we get it. Like you're a man, you want to friggin' dominate, but can you shut the fuck up for a little bit, and like actually take that energy where it matters, right? Men who can't take that energy where it matters and dominate where it really matters, which is in the arena of life, they'll usually go and play out their little insecurities when where they feel some remnant of control, which is among their friends, right? It's pathetic. So you always want to like avoid men like that too. um okay, what else can we talk about? Like, well, what else could we avoid? Like, there's so many things. That's the issue. There's so many things that are very telling. Yeah, I think we said enough today. But generally, like, keep out for those signs. It's the people I try to avoid, and it's served me very, very well. Very, very well. Um, Another thing that I can mention is people's relations with their genitals and their intimate parts. Um, I will always somehow indirectly ask the question, or I will either I will make a joke or a humorous remark or something along those lines, and I'll do this with the purpose of understanding what kind of relationship people have with their body, right? Um, Especially women, right? Now, first and foremost, psychosomatic, but still, if any part of your body disgusts you, or you have a reaction of ew, nasty, ooh, I don't want to deal with you at all, because that's a level of unawareness that that I don't like. Um, Usually, people who are disgusted with parts of their own body have very dark secrets. They have um, um, some sort of broken sexuality, right? They have some sort of intimacy issue, right? Um, these are the women who are like, if you talk to them about armpits, they'll say, "Ew, armpits! Like, what's wrong with armpits? Part of your body. They're part of your divine temple." Women who are disgusted by their own genitals, genitalia, intimate areas. Never. I never want to deal with those. Never ever. And I suggest you don't deal with those either. Women who are disgusted by their own feet. Women who don't take care of their their toes and their toenails. Never want to deal with them. Never ever. Right? You want a person to be aware of their whole body, because in a psychosomatic sense, right, that shows you that they have a heightened awareness in life. Like they are aware of what they are. They're not removed from their body. They're not rejected their body, but they have accepted themselves as who and what they are. And they are able to understand that there is no such thing as a nasty part of the body or some sort of like wrong thing to talk about or wrong thing to touch and so on and so forth, right? If they have like usually people like women who come from these heavily like religious, especially from the east, heavily religious backgrounds, they will have this shutdown effect with parts of their body where they're like, oh, you know what, it's your body. Have you not explored it? Have you not like touched it, felt it, seen it, taken care of it, blah blah blah? It's all very strange. Again, it's linked to some sort of just what I call sexual shutdown, like a rejection of one's own sexuality and sexual nature. She's gonna give you hell. You never want to deal with a woman like this, like unless you're really really into them and you are willing to go through, the energy it takes to get them out of this rut. But from my experience, it's very difficult to get them out of this rut because they've already sort of like made up their minds about it. um this is why, again, you love to make friends with and communicate and maybe even have intimate relations with people who have some sort of athletic past. You love that, right? Because these are people who have activated their consciousness and activated their awareness reverse engineer style, right? Who have explored the full breadth and depths of their body and their capability and what they're capable of. So they've ingrained this sort of sense of self love for their own body, even if they're like maybe out of shape of something like that right now, they're still going to have a healthy psychosomatic relationship with their body. Why do I use the word psychosomatic so much, even if it is a little bit out of context here? It's because it sort of like gathers all the notions of like when psychology is linked to physical manifestation, physical expression, and vice versa, right? So you want people who have working, active, natural, healthy psychosomatic connections and links, right, with their brain and their body. Um, so yeah, people who reject parts of their own bodies, you don't want to deal with them. I'm telling you, like you think it's a little thing, you think, oh, so like whatever, but it's very important. And when you've dealt with enough people, you understand just how important it is. You don't want to deal with these people. Um, whole bunch of this stuff. Obviously, self care and hygiene. Obviously, like if someone's not hygienic, if they like the only time that I can ever forgive that if someone is going through some sort of manic or truly depressive episode in their life, because and usually if they're rather hygienic, but like depression tends to do that where like there's this stage of self-hatred, right, where people like stop taking care of themselves. This doesn't mean that you should go and just reject them and just like throw them out, of your life, right? Like when someone needs help, you help them. But if it's a regular thing, if it's like a chronic thing, yeah, no thank you. Because at some point that becomes a choice, right? So you need to have this high standards for people. We don't have high standards for people, and we just accept any kind of, well, anything that comes into our life. And we are taught, or you are taught, let's say especially in the West, that you need to tolerate everyone and everything, just accept everyone as they are. Why? That one of the greatest freedoms and the greatest liberties you were given in this life, outside of your family and relatives and your chosen one, is to choose who you associate with, who you do business with, who you intermingle with, right? Who you spend your days with, your evenings, so on and so forth. You want to be very picky with people. You want to be, um, and you don't want to be not picky with people, right? The best people, the most successful people I know, people who have wonderful lives, harmonious lives, so on and so forth, they're very picky with the company they keep, right? So it's really important that you start thinking about these things in that in that manner, right? Someone's requesting to speak. Let's put you on there, my friend. If anyone wants to speak or ask a question or something, like feel free to request it.
Hey man, how are
How are you doing, my brother? We're doing well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I'm also very well. I unfortunately missed the most of the space, and I want to ask something that's sort of not really related to the space, if that's okay.
You got it.
So I want to ask about cycles of expansion and contraction in our like personal journeys. I've sort of been experiencing these cycles like every year, on and off and on and off. I can I can see the challenges that I face where I feel like I'm in these downward spirals that I have to go through and experience to learn certain lessons. And then when I finally like figure out what it is that I'm experiencing and what I'm meant to learn, then my life becomes very serendipitous and peaceful for a time. And I have like maybe 6 or 8 months of just beautiful experiences before I always slip back into this like contracting cycle.
Yeah,
And yeah, I want to know your comments on that.
that's a great question. I mean, it's complex. It's a complex topic. But how old are you, by the way, for Kartha?
25.
You're 25. Okay, so you're so how I would interpret that, and we all go through these things, by the way. It's just like some people have varying intervals, right? Some people have it slowly, some people have it quickly, so on and so forth. That is sort of like the procession of life where you're going from like a high to a low, then a high to a low. Usually that means you're going through a lot of spiritual lessons at once, right? And this will be the common reality. Like I can't talk about it like in an expansive manner, but I'll just say it like this. This can be a common reality for many people in the world right now who are looking for true spiritual progress because the portal is closing, so to speak, right? Like when the portal opens, it'll also close quickly. So if you are on a spiritual path, you're going to be asked to learn spiritual lessons quickly. You're going to be asked to accelerate and elate your consciousness. You're always going to be asked to do more than you think you're capable of, and you're always going to feel like you're like barely catching up. You're like barely catching up to the lessons that you need to learn. And that's going to be an overwhelming sensation if you're young and on the spiritual path. You have the innate sort of like the inner knowing that you need to go through these tests and you're sort of like like capable of going through them if you derive the lessons from it successfully. If it's you need to observe two things. One, is it the same misfortunes that are repeating? Is it the same cycle? Are you stuck in a loop? Or are the lessons different? And you have to be very honest with yourself, especially if you don't have someone around you who can be honest with you and for you. You have to be very honest with yourself. Am I failing to learn a single, sort of like, am I unable to complete a singular mission? Am I stuck in a loop? Or am I being fast forwarded to my better self? That is the question I would ask you. If you're stuck in a loop, you have to be honest with yourself. If you feel like you're going through different types of lessons and spiritual lessons and awakenings, then that's totally fine. You can also slow down, but the problem is sometimes we're not allowed to slow down. Sometimes these events need to occur and they need to happen in life. So, yeah, tell us, do you feel like you're stuck in a loop or do you feel like you're being fast forwarded?
Yeah. Well, so I feel like every single year I'm being forced in a way to learn and confront things that are becoming more subtle over time. Like a few years ago, it was very like I went from being a I was agnostic, but a materialist atheist to having a very rapid, sudden spiritual awakening and transforming my life completely and utterly. And that came with like a lot of spiritual ego, I would say. And then
Yeah,
since then, it's become a lot more subtle. I've been forced to appreciate other people and stop putting myself above them to 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 confront like really deep fears and heal my relationships with my parents, things that were like really a deep source of trauma. And like last year, I felt like I'd really overcome everything that I was aware of and had like a sort of experience of emptiness or shunyata, as it's known in Buddhism. And I was able to observe my thoughts and that came with like an even subtler sort of spiritual ego, I would say, where I thought that I could like overcome any challenge from that point on because I could see what was
yeah,
happening from this sort of higher vantage point, like of the self with a capital S, if you know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
But then this year, I went into this, and I've been like a cryptocurrency trader for about 6 years, and I went into this crazy downward spiral where I could see what was happening, but I couldn't change my behavior.
yeah,
Um, like I was totally self-aware the whole time, and
yeah,
I could see that I was making choices that were leading to what I was afraid of, and I couldn't stop myself. It was like utter compulsion.
yeah,
Um, and then that's like manifested now. I've been through the worst of it. Like I've essentially experienced the loss of my what was my livelihood, and my life has changed a lot now, and I've been very lucky to be able to immediately find work, and actually it's changed my life for the better in a lot of ways, which I'm really grateful
mhm,
for. But I don't know. It's about these like how is there a way to work with these cycles better and stop? Because for me, this
yes,
was a very long and drawn out cycle of
yeah.
frustration, and I wish it hadn't been so long. So that's my question.
I love that question. Um, okay. Firstly, about your experience, this is what we call in our circle, at least, spiritual awe. What you described, what you've experienced, and how we talk about spiritual awe is when you are you have the intellectual capacity to suddenly interpret the spiritual meaningfulness of the world, um, but then at the same time you don't have the wisdom or the spiritual know-how of to maneuver it properly. And a lot of people, especially young people around your age, 24, 25, 26, 20, they experience this in brutal ways. Now, you seem to have sort of like gone onto this downward spiral of spiritual awe early on now. So usually people take their time. So you thought it was a long period, but I would say it was not a long period because this spiritual awe sometimes for people lasts until they're 35 or 40, but usually tends to break around their first Saturn return, which is 2932 or 2931. Usually that's when they get the brutal awakening to, oh, I can't do everything. Oh, I actually am not as smart as I thought I was. Actually, I there's many things I don't know. So then you realize that you've only constructed another ego on top of your previous ego, right? Where this new ego tells you you're all capable, you can do whatever you want, you're blessed by the universe, you have this crazy aura, and there are many biases the universe feeds you in this when you're in this state, because you are in an elated state and you feel like you're in an elevated state as well, and in many ways you will attract the women, you will get the money, you will get this and that, so on and so forth, but it's fake. it's not confident confidence. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's you feel like you have every reason to think that you've unlocked the secrets of the world, and the moment you really believe that, the moment you really believe that, the mirror is going to shatter, because you can never outperform the thing that made you. And the audacity of a soul to think that, and we've all gone through it, I've gone through it myself as well, when you think you're just so smart and so edgy and so badass and so spiritually in line with the universe and everything, that you equate yourself to someone who's more than others. And that's when you're fucked up the ass, excuse my language, right? um Now you've gone through this humbling experience. Now the world has given you back your true agency, because what what is real important for other people to learn from what you said, I think, is to understand that at the end of thinking that we are all capable and capable with dealing with the whole of life on our own, is always the disappointing realization that we are not, in fact, as in control of ourselves as we thought. And that's very scary. It's sort of like mind shattering. Now, at your age, at 25, um, you have the you have the know-how on how to maneuver this sort of trauma. If this happened to someone who was like a little bit younger, they would have no idea how to maneuver the trauma, because their prefrontal cortex wouldn't be fully developed, and they wouldn't have the ability to self-assess and self-analyze, right? So I think it's important in your state. I'm not going to give you advice, but I think in your state, I can give you some sort of like a comforting word, as a distant friend, um, that this is just like a very small step in the spiritual humbling of the self. And once you've achieved that spiritual humbling, now you have an opportunity to experience real agency, really making things out of your own, the depth of your soul, outside of that sort of like manic ego type of thing. And you have an opportunity and a chance to, um, how to say, yeah, experience true decision making, right? um Not what you experienced before, where you're like, well, okay, I'm a compulsive trader, or I'm a compulsive gambler. What the lesson there was, that it showed you to be, don't overexert yourself, don't overestimate yourself, right? That's what it showed you. And then after that, what it showed you is that you are capable of losing everything you think you own, in just like that, with a snap of a finger. But you can also get back your true agency, right? And live life according to those those humbler those humbler ideas and those humbler codes, and you're going to be far more happy out of it. You're young, and you can get back to the grind, and there's no reason whatsoever to think that you're going to go into another downward spiral, man. If you have taken your spiritual lesson, if you still are able to remain on the spiritual path after being humbled so graciously, you have probably, you know, done it, and you're gonna get tested again, at around 30. You're gonna get tested again. It's just how life is. We all get tested.